Well, now it's to launch this book. So Encuentro were very keen that I should come and do an event in person. But I do have very good friends in Madrid, so it wasn't very difficult to get me to come. Potentially. Well, I think there are two tendencies in society now. As you say, on the one hand, we like to hide our wounds or pretend our wounds don't exist, and we all like to appear as invulnerable on Instagram. On the other hand, we are fixated with wounds and woundedness. Our daily press and weekly press abounds in articles about people who've gone through some great calamity and who expose their wounds and who ask for understanding and compassion and interest and reparation. And sometimes that is very good. It's in the name of justice. But there is also a tendency, I think, that we can sometimes get very enclosed within our wounds. And what a Christian perspective does is that it enables a much more interesting and complex perception, because a Christian optic takes it for granted that human beings are wounded. So that's in some ways not something to make too much of a fuss about. But it also refuses to accept that our woundedness defines us. And I think that stress on the non-finality of the wound is important, that my wound may condition me and may to a certain extent have directed my existence, but I'm still free with regard to my wound and free with regard to the way in which I engage with it. And that's where wounds can turn out to be opportunities, because they can deepen our consciousness, deepen our experience, potentially deepen our compassion. And in that way, I think a wound can become an opening to grace. But it's not automatic. I've got to seek it, and I've got to decide not to let myself be enclosed within my wound. Well, it's not, thank God, an autobiography, which wouldn't be very interesting. What it is, I mean, structurally, the book is an engagement with an ancient genre, really, in Christian art and literature, which is a meditation on the wounds of Christ. So it is, if you like, it's an attempt to conduct a kind of contemplation of Christ crucified. And I do that with the help of a medieval text, a 13th century poem, written by someone who was a Cistercian monk, a man called Arnulf of Leuven, that has had a great impact on European sensibility. It's inspired works of music, of poetry. In recent centuries, it's been largely forgotten. So I've dug out that text again, and the translation of the text is what defines the sevenfold structure of the book. And then I provide my own meditations on each of the stanzas of the poem. Well, I think our society suffers the sort of wounds that most Western societies suffer now. The wound of uncertainty, not at least, with so many structures collapsing, so many certainties collapsing, alliances collapsing, with ecological anxiety, economic anxiety, existential anxiety, the tremendous difficulty we have now articulating who we are as persons and as societies. So we live in a society in our Nordic countries that is less stable than it used to be, and that leaves people feeling more exposed and therefore, I think, more vulnerable. What we ascertain is that this vulnerability, which coincides with what I see as a kind of tectonic shift from a process of secularization to a state of post-secularism, is that there is a new openness to search for meaning. I mean, truth is no longer a bad word. And I think an increasing number of young people, not least, start to think that, well, perhaps not everything is provisional. Perhaps there might actually be criteria that are dependable. Perhaps there might actually be the possibility of founding my existence on a stable foundation and not just on shifting sands. And that is creating a very interesting new openness to questions of faith and genuine truth-seeking. It was, I was a very self-satisfied agnostic atheist, like so many teenagers are, which is why I have a certain sympathy for teenagers who are in that predicament and who affirm it with determination. But it's true that I myself was seeking in various ways when I was at that age. And a lot goes on when one is 15, 16. We should never take that lightly, what goes on in a young person. And as you say, it was the encounter with that particular piece of music that sort of broke something in me. It was an encounter with beauty. It was an encounter with an affirmation, with a particular line of text in that symphony, where a soprano soloist sings, you were not born in vain, you have not lived in vain, you have not suffered in vain. And I had, while listening, the certainty that this must be true. And then I had to try and work out why it wasn't in vain. I had a place at university to study languages. I was going to study Russian and Arabic. But this
Syriac, no?
Syriac came later.
Right.
But this existential process was going on. And in the summer before starting studies, it seemed clear to me that I just have to do this search full time. So I changed to theology. So I did a first degree in theology. Then I did a doctorate in historical theology on Pierre de Bérulle, a key figure in the French Counter-Reformation, and a paradoxical political figure in French politics in the 1620s, with strong links for a while to the Count Duke Olivares in Spain. The two of them have an interesting correspondence. And then I taught for a bit after that. I don't know, I think they were so used to my being strange anyway that a bit further strangeness didn't really knock them off their perches. Yes, I always, it's very interesting that this is a topic that a lot of people talk about these days, even in the secular media. So I'm asked this question quite regularly, and I'm always keen to say that yes, I see it, but it's not a flood wave. It's a kind of a discrete awakening, and we'll see what it turns into. There's always a certain fad dimension to these sort of things, and fads change quickly. But I do also find in the young people I meet, and I'm fortunate to meet many of them, that there is a great sincerity and authenticity of seeking. But what I also find interesting is that as it were, in the substratum of society and in culture, we see the emergence of religious themes, of Christian themes, in a way that we just wouldn't have expected 10 years ago. I think Norway is still astonished, I think, to have produced a Catholic Nobel Prize-winning author and poet in Jon Fosse, and to have as one of our most our most characteristic writers, someone who writes so openly about God, about the search for truth, about grace. I saw just last week the last film by the Norwegian director Joachim Trier, which is on in the cinemas of Madrid now, I think, Sentimental Value, which is extraordinary, because he is not, as far as I know, in any way an explicitly religious artist, but that film is an exploration of reconciliation and grace. And those manifestations, I think, are extremely significant, because they tell us something about what's going on at the depth of society, and the fact that people pick up these signals and attend to them, read the books, go to the cinema, that shows us that something is going on, and we'll have to try and respond to it responsibly and intelligently.